Episodes!
Yeah! That's what I'm talking about. They do say you should start podcasts with enthusiasm.
Welcome to NOCLIP. I'm Chad Rutherman.
I'm JJ Artemis.
And I'm Andy Kinney.
And today we're going to be talking about Splatoon 2. In celebration of 50 episodes, we're returning to the first episode we ever made talking about Splatoon 1. So, Splatoon is a third-person shooter developed and published by Nintendo and released on the Nintendo Switch in 2017. Not too fucking long ago from right now. And despite what you might have heard if you listen to the Splatoon episode, we're all pretty big fans of Splatoon, including me, despite not even understanding what the hell I was doing 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. So, there's a lot to talk about with this game that we did a fairly poor job of covering in around the first time. And we've definitely spent a lot of time with it, so I think the first thing we need to do is settle all major Splatoon arguments. So, Callie is the best Squid Sister. You don't have to paint your base as soon as you start the game.
True.
And Splat Tim is the best Splatoon meme.
I agree with all those.
I guess. That's sort of like saying, like, what's the best potato, though?
You mean
Callie.
All of them are okay, but then one of them is the best one by far?
Tell me which potato is the best one by far.
Splat Tim is the best one by far.
Okay.
It's the best Splatoon. Well, actually, honestly,
yes.
This is a legitimate thing that I want to talk about a little bit.
Yes.
So the best Splatoon meme might actually have been usurped by Pearl as Pennywise because it's really, really goddamn funny. But they removed Splatnet from Splatoon 1. And then in Splatoon 2, we now have, like, whatever their Garbo Twitter thing is. But I love the prevalence of trends in the plaza, which didn't, like, as far as I could tell, didn't really ever happen in the first game.
Yes.
Like, it was never, like, a widespread thing, barring on Splatfest.
I think it's because the Miiverse was, like, regulated. And, like, they don't actually really keep tabs on the Twitter thing like they should.
Possibly. I've been pretty surprised, honestly, by the amount of, like, just unbridled positivity that has been on it, with the occasional, like, stick-in-the-mud asshole who's like, I hate the new thing. That's cool.
Yeah, I'm really curious, though we will, of course, never know, what actual algorithm they use to decide what shows up in plazas. Because you can tell now that compared to the first game, it's probably like based. Like everyone,
yeah, I think it's like upvotes essentially.
Yeah. Like everyone in the whole world seems to have the same plaza.
Yeah, it's people that you play with who are set like close to the lobby, mm-hmm. and then everyone else in the plaza seems to be just like the most popular posts.
I wouldn't expect that to be a thing that produced like immense positivity. I would expect that, like so many content aggregation systems, to like heavily favor like contrarianism and
being a jokey jokester.
Yeah, complaining about stuff. Like I would have expected more things like nerf the blank, buffs for blank.
True, yeah. I feel like most of the people in Splatoon, and I feel like I'm speaking directly to Andy's heart here, mm-hmm. Don't actually care that much about the game balance. Like, most of the people who are playing the game, like, I care a lot about the game balance and about, like, what weapons are getting what percent changes to what little bullshit they do. Mm-hmm. But that's just a side effect of me being, like, a try-hard idiot.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And this game has actually done just a ton of that sort of, like, minute little balancing, although in a like uniquely Nintendo way of theming updates around particular like things
and keeping things, you know, generally obscure enough like veiled under some kind of foreign secrecy. We have to like decode what they actually mean every time there's an update.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is legitimately commendable and surprising how much for this game they have been totally on their game in terms of consistent updates, balanced changes, and the kind of modern day online game as service release schedule that's been ramping up more and more in the industry. I would not expect a company that is so often derided for its shitty online services to be this consistent about it. And frankly, at least in terms of Splatoon balance, so good at actually what they do on that schedule.
Something that I'm not 100% sure what your thoughts are on it is I'm a little bit concerned in like the long term, because I feel like the more the game has gotten patches and updates, everything just keeps getting like stronger and stronger, and very few things are being like pulled back. I feel like the balance is like they're pulling everything up to the same level. Mm-hmm. But they're just raising it from things that weren't as good as something to now everything is super good. I don't know how well that's going to pan out in the future when they start making more minute changes. It's going to be like, this week everyone uses the sloshing machine and that's the only weapon you see.
I think those kind of balanced questions are complex enough that they're not the sort of thing we're going to be able to predict in advance. Because, like, what determines whether or not raising all boats or lowering all boats on average is a good or bad thing depends on where, like, the meta comparative average ends up. And that's something that I don't think we could ever know, and is kind of the fun thing about meta changes based on balance updates in the first place. Because they're, like, beyond the human keen until you have, like, huge sample sizes that determine what's good, bad, and fun.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, there's a lot of people like me playing the game. They're just going to keep using the weapon they like, no matter what.
I mean, that is obviously fine. And, like, I don't use weapons I don't like using because of their relative strength. The one thing that I'm hoping does happen is, like, this is October. It's early October right now. At the time of this recording, at least, playing Turf War is like it is a sea of aerosprays and splushomatics. It's like the only guns that I ever see. And that's the kind of thing that, like, you know, maybe a game with, like, I didn't count. I should have counted.
You should have counted
40-some weapons in it right now?
Because I think you're exaggerating. I think we need statistics on this, and I think this is the kind of thing that, like, Turf War exists for whatever random bullshit people want to pull out in Turf War.
Oh yeah, and I 100% agree with that philosophy. I just think that people should stop using the weapon they like using if that weapon is literally in every game.
You're just being a tryhard curmudgeon again.
It's not even like, I don't feel like I don't even have a skewed win-loss against aerosprays or with aerosprays. I think it's been totally average, and I don't think that the gun is overpowered or underpowered. I just find it so weird that they're everywhere.
They do look cool.
And they're, like, really good at coverage, and I think that's what, like, a lot of people think is good when they start.
Yeah.
True.
Looking cool is an extremely important thing in this game. The aerosprays kind of thematically, visually, and mechanically all lean into the things people, especially people who haven't experienced Splatoon before, think is cool about Splatoon.
Right. Like things like covering the ground in lots of paint and having a sci-fi cool gun.
Yeah, well, it looks like
it's a card detailer.
Yeah, like a card detailer.
It's super...
But it does also look like a sci-fi gun.
A little bit, yeah.
I mean, it's a sci-fi gun in the Saints Row sense, where everything's made of some kind of precious
like
metal.
Chrome.
Yeah, you look sweet, you paint everywhere, you don't really have to aim, it's up close and personal, so you can feel all surprisey and fun. I think even if aerosprays were more terrible than they are currently, they would still be played all over the place for good reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I was one of those people in the first game that loved the aerospray early on.
Right.
And, that was wise, because it was such, like, a huge coverage, and you didn't have to be quite as good at aiming.
One of my favorite things about Splatoon 2 is seeing how as this game's acquired a new audience of people who would never have bought a Wii U for completely understandable reasons. The exact, or at least close to exactly the same sort of like general balanced trends that overtook Splatoon 1 are repeating themselves in Splatoon 2. I think we're just now getting to the point. It was like right when everyone thought that the Tri-Slosher was broken was like when the first true deviation happened meta-wise. But otherwise, it was all the same people getting into the mechanics, learning how cool the movement was, thinking like, my goal is to paint, I should only paint, ergo, paint your base, as like a weird meme. Like all of those things keep happening, all of people relearning these different skills. It's really cool to watch from a distance as someone who was there with Splatoon 1, and I just hope in the end it's not all chargers again.
Yeah, that would be... Well, I think they... So, okay, it's been, like, noted, and I believe this should at least get into some of the major points that we wanted to talk about, that the team behind Splatoon is, like, as far as, shooter developers go, incredibly passionate about it.
Oh, yeah.
They love the fact that they have a fan base, and they love the people who love this game take it so seriously. And I think that in response to what was generally derided as kind of a shitty time in Splatoon 1 where everyone just used a charger, they took the chargers in Splatoon 2, and they didn't change that much about them, but they made the game way faster. And they were like, chargers are going to have a hell of a time now.
Faster is an easy way to describe what I think all three of us like know as equally true about the changes between the first and the second game. I would not have chalked it up to speed as much as I would have chalked it up to differences in level design that have produced really interesting and different incentives on you as a player and how people approach fights. There is so much more stuff everywhere that has other effects that I'll talk about later, like in terms of aesthetics that I think hurt the levels somewhat. But every map now has like generally raised central area, generally lots of little bits of like exactly inkling high cover that you can duck around and jump over and do all sorts of fun stuff. What comes to mind is especially like Muscle Forge Fitness, the rock wall one, in terms of just all this junk that just breaks your line of sight all over the place. There isn't anything like the old warehouse in the first game where you just have a sight line point to point forever. Yeah,
it goes across the whole thing. They just put in that weird U wall in the ranked modes.
Indeed. And that was, I think, one of the things that led people from a meta decision to start like really using all of these buckets. Like, because the bucket didn't get any better than it was in Splatoon 1. No. It was just a level around it that changed, that made a weapon that was good in short range and could go over cover.
Over a wall, yeah.
Yeah, way, way, way more useful.
See, and because of things like that, and because of the nerf to... I say nerf, it's a different game, so it's irrelevant. They really nerfed Park Place in life. I guess a bad comparison. But the nerf to specials, like the fact that they reined the power level of specials in so much between the first and second game, that information is so strong in Splatoon 2, where it wasn't quite as strong in Splatoon 1 because way more people had access to it.
What do you mean by the information?
Like, knowing where, like, actual, like, I guess tactical information, like a fucking SWAT team, where you just know where people are or where they're likely to be. Mm-hmm. You no longer have a map that's like a glance down. You have to actually press a button and obscure your vision to do it. Echolocator doesn't exist anymore. Basically, point sensors, thermal ink, and sorta, kinda the Tenna missiles and Stingray give you knowledge of where people are. And because the game has so many more little areas where squids can kind of like duck behind a wall or like stand next to something and obscure your sight, being able to actually just know where shit is a lot more valuable. And it also values weapons that are better in close quarters because you can be sneaky and be unseen.
Yep, you can react better.
Which was definitely a factor in Splatoon, but it wasn't in the same... Because, like, if you just, like, popped up to shoot, somebody from a million miles away could just see you do it.
Right.
So, it's the actual gameplay feels faster because of that focus on close quarters stuff.
Right. We recognize that as a very intentional design shift that they've made in terms of different access to information and different level design structures that promote hiding and sort of deter long-range shooting. Is that a change that we like compared to the first game?
I'm undecided. When I first started playing the game, I noticed that the levels felt different, and I wasn't really sure why. But I do agree with what you guys were saying. It's the close quarters kind of emphasis. I feel like I kind of lean more towards the first game, but I don't know. Because it has been a while since I played it, and it might just be a nostalgia thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, I played Splatoon, the original Splatoon, for less time overall than either of you did, I think.
Right.
But I played it later into its life cycle than either of you did.
Right.
So, I don't know. Maybe it's because I lived long enough to see myself be killed by chargers over and over again, that in most changes, which arguably there haven't been a lot of, but in most of the changes, I lean toward the sequel. I feel like I enjoy Splatoon 2 as a game more. Not a lot more, but a little bit. And I think that these changes are... It's weird because it's forced me into a medium range, weapon set as well. Because in the first game, I used the Tri-Slosher a lot, and then it was determined to be broken in Splatoon 2, but I didn't know because I was using, the Splattershot Pro. I, stopped using it completely, the Rapid Blaster, things that have very set ranges. So I like the faster-paced things, and I like fucking around with different weapons. I try and be, as competent as I can be with all of them. Mm-hmm. But I think overall, just generally speaking, I think the changes have made the game more enjoyable for me.
Agreed. I also, like you, feel like it's slightly better. And that's spoiler alert, kind of my general opinion of Splatoon 2 overall. Not every change they made I thought was for the better, but most were. But I don't think it's I'm not married to the opinion. They're games that are similar enough that there aren't a lot of meaningful differences to them, and I think that there can be fruitful discussions or opinions on both sides of the issue. I can imagine someone who just generally likes the kind of tension of sniper battles more, liking late stage Splatoon 1 play more than anything Splatoon 2 could give them. They're just weird, subtle flavor variants on the same experience.
I get the feeling that Splatoon 2 was what Splatoon 1 was ramping up to be. Because if you look at the later stages that were added, things like Anchovy Games and Piranha Pit have... Well, Piranha Pit follows the exact same scenario with elevated platform in the middle, lots of little small areas to the sides.
That's the one with the conveyor belts?
With the conveyor belts.
That does feel like a Splatoon 2 stage.
Yeah, and Absolutely. So does Anchovy Games, because it has tons and tons of just fucking a box sitting there for you to walk around and take a little bit of cover here and there. And that's the kind of thing because those levels were not particularly kind to chargers, and they weren't particularly kind to the heavy splatling, unfortunately for Chad. And all of that kind of thing was I feel like Splatoon 2 feels like more of a natural progression than I would have guessed.
Yeah. I remember in the first game, the first new stage they added was the Kelp Dome. Mm-hmm. And I remember hating it because it was so open.
Huge.
It was such a huge stage, and I really liked the more closer quarters, more intimate, I guess, kind of level design of the other stages. And it's this game kind of took that direction where everything is more open. And this is a completely different tangent of the same topic, but one of my things is I feel aesthetically a lot of the stages in the first game are more memorable, and the stages in the second game feel almost more like they were made from
a template.
Template, yeah. Not like a tile set, but like a 3D version of a tile set.
Right.
Like they had like blocks that they clicked together to make the stage.
Like raised platform here or whatever.
Yeah. And then they went back in and added some like specific aesthetic differences to each.
It's because it's harder for them to be evocative when in the later stages that they were trying to make, they had more required physical things that had to exist. Like, it's a lot easier to make a space look like something that we know when there's less physical structures that you have to put in it and account for. Like, it's easy for Walleye Warehouse to look like a warehouse because there can just be one pile of like
crates.
Obvious crates and not a whole lot else around it, just like some walls and other rigging that they can juice up however they want. But if Walleye Warehouse has to be filled with like one specific high central tower, two other like symmetrical crates at these angles, like there's just more that you have to do, so it becomes harder to do anything evocative with that afterwards. It hurts, I think, a lot of the stages aesthetically because they all sort of bleed into one another mechanically in a way that they didn't in the old games. There's less diversity when everything has to have a whole lot of little like hidey platforms, as we described before, leading up to a central space.
Yeah, I feel like they are getting... See, at this point, the stage discussion is really sort of eye-opening for me because obviously, in retrospect, you guys care quite a bit about the aesthetics of the stages. Yeah. Whereas, until you said it just now, I really didn't notice just how similar, like, Humpback Pump Track is to Starfish main stage, right? Yeah. Like, they both are just a central platform with flank routes. And that's it.
It kind of feels like that's what all the stages are.
Right. And I kind of prefer the stages in Splatoon 2 for the most part. My least favorite stage in Splatoon 2, still Moray Towers. Still doing it up, being the dumbest garbage ever. And for the same reason that I don't like Moray Towers, of the new stages that they've added, I'm not a huge fan of the Manta Maria. Hilarious jokes. Manta Marina, I believe, actually. Yeah. Because it is... Every time you die, if you don't have a jump option, you have to go such a long way to get to where the conflict is. And that's just not that engaging. The smaller stages, to me, are always more enjoyable.
It's so interesting, in the stages specifically, to look at their iterations on the same stage, especially. Like, what was the name of the stage in Splatoon 1 that they first did a big update to that wasn't Moray Towers?
Oh, it's the one that's like the reef in this game.
Exactly.
Urchin Underpass.
Yeah. When you might have started playing after this.
I believe I did.
But there was an original version of Urchin Underpass that was very kind of simple, comparatively. And when they updated it, they added lots more differences in terrain height. It started looking less like a realistic space that people would walk around in or just like be in the world.
Right.
And they expanded it out and they added more flank routes. They did the same thing to Moray Towers 3 different times now because there was the initial Moray Towers, revised Moray Towers,
and now the one with the inclines.
Right.
Yeah.
So they keep adding more complexity and more stuff that you can hide behind and interact with and do in all these multiplayer levels.
Right.
And I do think I slightly prefer it mechanically. I've never been a Moray Towers hater, but I do always like having...
Get on board.
It really is just...
Fuck Moray Towers!
I actually don't mind Moray Towers mechanically, but, like... Literally every time Chad and I play, it's in rotation. And that's just, like, made me not like it.
You were saying, though, you've never been a Moray Towers hater.
I don't even know, remember, or care. Screw you guys.
Cool.
I was going to say, and I don't know how relevant it is to this discussion that we were on, but, because I was thinking about, in the original game, my favorite stage, like, hands down, was the Black Belly skate park. Was that what it was called?
Yeah, Black Belly skate.
And I think, like, a kind of, like, equivalent in this game is Humpback Pump Track.
Yeah.
It's, like, a bigger stage with lots of, like, bowls. And
it has
and
curved.
Stuff.
It's really satisfying movement on stages like that.
And, like, I loved Black Belly Skate Park, but Humpback Pump Track just feels like one of the crowd in this game.
Yes.
And, like, I don't know, like, what the difference is. It might just have been the variety, like JJ said.
I feel like I would take multiple stages that are like like the pump track or the main stage or the reef or whatever, than I would having stages in rotation every once in a while, like names, Salt Spray Rig. That has like such a clearly defined objective, even in Turf War.
Yeah,
and honestly, not much of what happened in the ranked version of Salt Spray even really gave a shit about that whole area.
Was Salt Spray the one with like the pit in the middle of water, and there's like the two sides,
and it has the huge back area that wins you the game if you control it?
Yep, that's the one.
Which, I mean, whatever. Everybody loves Salt Spray Rig because it was one of the original maps. It's got King's Row syndrome.
That one was one of my least favorites in the first one, actually.
Yeah, I don't really like that, and I would rather have a more balanced experience overall.
That is another one of the trade-offs they made here, is that now that all of the stages are mechanically more similar, the rotation stings less for everybody.
Yeah.
Because there's less variability between the stages. So you're less likely to get a stage that you really, really hate, because there just aren't that many differences. Like, in the old game, if you got Moray, people would just scream at you. But even, like, new game version of Moray is close enough that less people complain.
Yeah. And additionally, I don't know when they changed this, but originally wasn't the rotation time for in Splatoon 1 4 hours?
Yes.
And then and in 2 it's 2. So there's even that's even more, just a little bit more variety to the now stagnant stages. So it kind of keeps them fresher a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And I do want to go into that rotation discussion. But I think one kind of important mechanical note about the way that they've designed the stages that I think ties everything together in that first bit that we did is the design of specials in the game affects the design of the stages so significantly, or vice versa. Because with this new emphasis on sort of ducking behind a rock and then sharking somebody as they come by, or just, using the terrain to your advantage to avoid being murdered, a lot of the specials now just sort of get you the fuck out of cover. Like, Inkstorm gets you out of cover, Tenna Missiles gets you out of cover, Stingray gets you out of cover. Like, literally any, Ink Armor, whatever.
Yeah.
Bubble Blower can be used that way, but it's not its best use.
Yeah.
Or even, a good one. Don't do that.
I get your point, though, that the power of specials as they brought them into this game was less about, accomplishing very direct and specific things to other players, like killing them, immediately cutting off this zone specifically, and more about, generalist contextual uses that are weaker for specific goals, but can be used for more things simultaneously, and importantly feel great to use inexplicably despite being weaker. But it's almost like, in terms of the stages, in terms of the few new weapons that they added, and in terms of the way that they made most specials not very far from the, I win this encounter button that they used to be in the old games.
Right.
Everything's very focused on what you as a player can do, more than the last game. To compare it to something like Overwatch, there's less, special coordination in terms of determining the outcome of what's going to happen, at least at, the casual level.
Right.
Than there is making sure that you pull off sweet stunts and tricks, which is good because the movement mechanics are what make this game good. We weren't here for the Inkzuka. We were here so you could throw a burst bomb against a wall while you run around a corner and hide up against the wall when someone comes around, and then jump off and shoot them when they don't notice the ink on your wall.
Yeah,
and all sorts of crazy fun movement bullshit.
Yeah, that is, that kind of thing is exactly what makes Splatoon, the game that it is. It almost has, Titanfall 2, I guess, is probably the only other shooter I can think of off the top of my head that was both popular and also, predominantly good because of its movement mechanics.
Yeah.
Splatoon just does an outstanding job of making everything seem, really fast and give a lot of velocity, and just momentum is a big thing in this game.
Yeah. Is it just me, or does it feel like the specials in this game make you way more vulnerable while you're using them than the first one?
Generally, yeah. That's
Yeah,
correct.
it depends a lot on which ones you're using, obviously, but like, most of them make you stop firing your main weapon.
I feel like I catch people like trying to pop off their special and just kill them before they can use it, like, all the time.
I'm happy about that. That means more counterplay and more strategy on the part of the people using the special, because now I can't just use the antenna missiles whenever I have it. I have to think. Even with defensive things like the baller or the ink armor, there's normally, at least in the ink armor's case, there's a wind-up time before you can use it, so you can't use it like the oh shit button that you could use the bubbler for in the original game.
I use bubbler weapons a lot, but fuck the bubbler. That is a not interactive kind of uncool game mechanic.
Yeah, 'cause I use the Tenatech a lot, and I've just been, like, through negative reinforcement, like, just never think to use my special anymore. It's like any time I would use it, it felt like I immediately just got killed.
Is Tenatech Splashdown or Inkzuka?
Inkzuka.
Or not Inkzuka, but
Inkjet.
Inkjet. Yeah. That's because you can't use it like an ultra mode. You have to use it like a weird tactical thing.
I ended up, like, whenever I do use it, I end up just trying to fly over the person. You can kill them with the jet part.
Yep.
And it's like a way more reliable kill than hitting them with the gun.
Considering there's only one weapon that I use with any modicum of regularity that has inkjet, I can safely say I've never killed anyone with the jets.
Oh, yeah. That's majority of my kills with the inkjet, or with the jet.
Yeah, but it's
not the ink.
It's fun that they thought of like that creative of a use for it that allows for some cool trade-offs between you being vulnerable at close range. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Among the millions of cool decisions that I think that they made with the specials that everyone, I think ourselves included, had to sort of warm up to over time.
Yeah.
Because everyone immediately felt that hurt of losing their I win the encounter button, of which there were many in the original Splatoon.
I remember playing the test fire and just being taken aback by like how bad I thought they were.
Yep.
Yeah. But like,
to be fair,
like, literally, like, anytime like somebody used like a splashdown, it felt like it was just so easy to back up.
Yeah.
And then just shoot them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like things like that.
And those are some of the things that they've addressed in the patches.
Yeah.
Where the specials are now like apparently based on some this is like really current shit that I don't necessarily want to focus on. Mm-hmm. But like evidently they think they made the baller way too good, considering they just made everything able to shred them now. Which they just didn't take the health away that they gave it before, so I'm not 100%, but the baller is now just like a murder machine, and like splashdown in the test fire you couldn't do shit with it, but currently you can kill somebody with it from like 100 feet away.
It is much better now.
Yeah, and they're reining that back in, so like who knows where this game's going to end up in a couple of months. Like different specials are going to feel very different, but the thing that they don't have in this game that I wasn't used to coming to Splatoon 2 from Splatoon 1 were like fire and forget specials. So I don't have the ink strike, I don't have the whale. The things that I have are like stingray, which requires you to be very conscious about where you use that because you're incredibly vulnerable. And like tenna missiles also take like a million years to get off, but as you've mentioned, feels so fucking good.
Yeah. Like it really is a testament to, I don't know, video games in general that they were able to take a mechanic that is, I think, pretty objectively weaker than anything you could have done in Splatoon 1 and make it feel awesome. Oh my god. Like the missiles, everyone loves the missiles even though they kind of usually do nothing. They are mechanically just a way to try and force people to force people to move, a way to get them out of cover, as we talked about before.
Unless you can find a cluster of people.
Right.
And then they might get hit by...
Yeah, they might fuck up and go into each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, like, just to focus on the missiles specifically for a second, they've got so many cool, like, little counterplays to them. You have, like so many of the specials, you have to be safe before you use them. Once you activate it, can use it like an echolocator in the short or long term, where you know where everyone's at, and you have control over the number of people you catch in it, but you don't always necessarily want to catch the maximum number of people, because if someone's close to you, they could reach you, because it takes longer to fire more missiles. So it even lets you have, like, if you launch it, didn't realize someone was sneaking up on you, because it's way easier to sneak up on people in this game, you can just fire one missile at that person as like a defensive move, and it takes a quarter of a second, and then you're back in the game again. Like there's nothing that really happens unless you royally mess up with the missiles, which is hard to do because you can see where all the enemies are.
Right.
That will result in your death. Something cool is always going to happen from your perspective, and you do the little animation and the rumble. And
everyone is missing out on some grade A pantomime going on. But no, and like that feels good from like a game feel and like actual, appearance, aesthetic value that the Ten of Missiles have. And then they've given the other specials, like with the exception of the original version of the Stingray, which felt bad to use and nobody used it, now is even sort of like an impressive thing to behold as it like cleaves its way through an entire map, searching for one guy to maybe do a little bit of damage to.
Yeah, that's one of the best, like, not numbers-based balance changes, like actual straight mechanic changes I've seen in a multiplayer game in a long time. Yep. It's crazy how there was like universal agreement that this thing was bad, and the balance team addressed it immediately, specifically, and effectively in a way that everyone's kind of happy with and no one thinks is like broken in any way.
Right.
Like they just fixed it instantly. It's so rare for that to ever happen in a game like this when you're dealing with multiplayer shooter communities who get super invested and will argue everything to death. Mm-hmm. I guess that's part of it, because this is the kind of game where there is less of an audience for communication. Like because of how much social media gets monitored by Nintendo's official channels, and how there aren't really like general Splatoon communication channels that aren't like the hardest of the hardcore. You don't really have a lot of outlets for those kind of things to be openly discussed. Like Splatoon isn't popular enough for there to be a lot of those kind of controversies that we find in lots of other multiplayer games.
At the very least, not in English-speaking countries.
At the very least, not in English-speaking countries.
Yeah.
And if it's not in the U.S., I don't know or care about it.
Which is actually, that's something that's kind of important about what they did with Splatoon 2 coming from the Wii U. Because one of the things that you just know if you played a lot of the original Splatoon is that 99% of the time you're playing with a lot of people who don't have names that are legible to you. And it's because they had worldwide matchmaking. Now, Splatoon does a super great job generally of masking lag. Like, you rarely see somebody just like blink in and out of existence in different spots. Mm-hmm. But it's obviously still present and is far worse than in a lot of other games.
Yes.
But they've, I assume, to mitigate that, restricted matchmaking to regional in the sequel. And that kind of, like, I don't know. For one thing, it impresses me how popular this game is even in, like, the North American region. Because it's never been a situation where I've sat in a queue for, like, 30 minutes waiting on a game.
Yeah.
But also, like, the general lack of real servers is kind of a problem.
I think it's definitely a problem considering the goals that Nintendo, at least Nintendo marketing, seems like it wants to set for the game, in terms of like the audience that this game was presented as being for, based on the first trailer where it got revealed, was a whole bunch of people walking into a boxing arena after literally being like in the back room with a whiteboard making and writing up strategies based on the maps.
Right.
And it has not really hit that audience at all, because of lots of extremely detailed technical things that are less about game design, which Nintendo knows, and more about your server tick rate and response times
and voice chat
and and voice chat. And
did you see Floyd Mayweather? That was a Splatoon 2 match.
Oh, they just sit down.
They got into the boxing.
Pick up their controller.
Yeah, and they played 1v1 Splat zones. It's a really good match.
If Pacquiao had to select a Splatoon weapon set, which would he pick?
You gotta go. What? He's I don't know shit about boxing.
No, abandon joke. Yeah, we're too ignorant to make the joke.
Manny Pacquiao's a lightweight, so I'm gonna guess that he would go with like the Octo Brush.
That screams lightweight to
locked
you?
it in.
A brush
like,
larger than your body?
True, but it's all about, like, fast movement.
Okay.
And then sneaking up behind the other boxer and back of the head.
That's exactly
how boxing works.
Right. You lay down some ink, you swim underneath your opponent, and you hit them in the back of the head.
Exactly.
I'm stopping this so we can get back to important competitive Splatoon discussions.
No, I like the idea of, like, a boxing ring and, like, there's a guy, you know, they're, like, doing the dance. They're, like, going back and forth, left and right.
Dance,
The
what
dance.
they call it, yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's the sweet science. And all of a sudden one of them just, like, scrunches up real tiny and then leaps into the sky. And they're like, oh my god, what's he doing? What you didn't notice, there's a squid beacon on the other side of the room. Lands down, bop, knocks the other dude out. I love boxing.
You're waiting for that Punch-Out Splatoon crossover. Or ARMS Splatoon crossover. But anyway.
We don't talk about ARMS here, Andy. But anyway, so they fucked up a lot of quality of life things that are really important to people who want to invest their entire lives into this video game, which are not us, for reference. I want to make a big asterisk on here of we are not even close to that space. But
it depends on how you define close to. Like, I do not have anywhere close to the, like, talent required to be considered for, like, Splatoon esports as a thing, as a concept. But it's still something that I enjoy, like, following.
Oh,
and,
sure.
like, the top-level meta strats.
I'm trying to make a distinction between the football player and the football fan.
Sure.
And football fans can go real goddamn deep about knowledge of, metaphorically speaking, the meta.
Right, the meta of football.
Yeah, and all of these different details about players, strategies, changes, any fact that you can learn, but not necessarily a skill that we hold. And I'm claiming we don't hold the skills and don't have friends who hold the skills.
Not yet. Watch out. NOCLIP team. Team NOCLIP 2018.
God. So, even though they've failed to really capture the audience that they seem to have been aiming for, there's just so many minor annoyances. Like, there's a lot of the same stuff that existed in the last game that everyone, at least in the US, complained about. In terms of not being able to select your stages that you want to play, not being able to change gear after you've entered a lobby, not being able to leave a lobby ever, not being able to coordinate what weapons are with your team, and for all practical purposes, you still can't actually have any sort of voice chat with your team or what they do. You can't have voice chat ever in Turf War, no matter what you do, even if you buy the crazy nonsense separate headset and use the dedicated app to use it.
Right.
I think it's important to note that what they're selling with that thing, and this is a very good and sly move on their part, is not voice chat, because the service they provide can't be replicated, at least with people at my technical faculties, by Discord, because you need both the audio of the game and the audio of your friends in the same thing.
Right.
So they sell a shitty proprietary thing that does only that.
A shitty arrow. Yeah.
Yeah. None of us own this headset, correct?
No.
So we can't comment on actual build quality of the item.
I've heard not great, also seemingly made for kids.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I looked into potentially getting it because I thought you needed the arrow to use voice chat, but you don't. You can just use one headphone, which is what I do anyway. So.
Yeah. The weird median thing. But yeah. So for no clear reason, you can't form like consistent parties in your game. You can't like play with just a group of your friends against a group of rando people in Turf War ever.
Yeah.
There's limitations about the certain combinations of friends you can play. You can't have 3 people all at the same time on the same team. There's limitations. Even within that, the only way you can voice chat is to play in these like league battles or custom offline battles. And the only way you can play league battles is if you are good enough in the like competitive modes in Splatoon. So
to solo queue your way to B-.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and you have to do that in each mode individually of the 3 modes that exist.
You don't actually have to. I mean, you will have to do it if you just want to be B- in all the modes. But in order to get into League, you just have to get to B- in one mode, and it unlocks the whole thing.
Okay, thank God.
Yeah.
One less pebble we can remove off the scale here.
Barely better, but it is better.
But they've thrown up a wall not just on League battles entirely, but on essentially any coordination with your friends in this like team-based competitive game, and completely written off any sort of voice chat for the vast majority of their players.
Right.
For not a whole lot of clear, publicly known purposes. Like, if they were trying to make themselves, the classic Nintendo kid-friendly stereotype, they picked a weird middle ground for that. Right. Where they just put up a huge barrier to entry.
I feel like it was important for them not to get the reputation that other console shooters get.
Extremely.
Yeah. The voice chat's the most understandable thing for me, because that is what the majority of people who play the game will call out immediately as being like, oh, why don't they have voice chat? And then immediately say, oh, because I would just go on there and go like, dicks, 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 and then a 12-year-old would cry.
Right.
And Nintendo doesn't want that to happen. The one thing, the biggest gripe that I have, honestly, is the fact that you can't party with people. Yeah. Like, I don't, like, the explanation that I always see given is that Turf War is a no competition, friendly, just whatever mode. Which obviously is not true. Turf War is where the hardest competition is. And that they don't want you to get an unfair advantage over the other team by having friends. But every game ever lets you party up with friends. And I don't think anyone's ever complained about balance in that situation before.
At the very least, they could just have 2 different versions of it. One that's casual, like in Smash Brothers, like for glory or for fun.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, like they could have like a competitive version of Turf War.
But they were worried about dividing up, their community further and further into all these subdivisions, I'm sure. Since even when they were releasing Splatoon 2 on the Switch after critical success and some commercial success of Splatoon 1, they couldn't make the guarantee with this still like getting its feet new IP that it was going to have like a kind of long-term appeal and availability where every custom version of the game you wanted to play could be available. But you're right. They could choose between if they really were concerned about those like balance issues of people getting stomped, as if people don't get stomped because they're mismatched in Turf War already.
There's a lot of one-sided battles in Turf War already.
Yeah. Like we played a couple of days ago, and we're repeatedly matched with people who were like clearly not playing, like not. Experienced players of the game, and just that team that contained those players would just lose every time.
Right.
I think a part of the reason, asterisks, as we've already discussed, it's clearly a thorn in the side of their competitive aspirations, that there's this many barriers to entry to enter like a competitive mindset where you get a team of friends, play, practice together whenever you want, and talk to each other. Right. But I think what came into conflict with that, the other value that they tried to uphold when they were making this game, is that both the original Splatoon and Splatoon 2 are the most like solo queue focused multiplayer game experiences I think I've ever had. This game really, really optimizes itself under the assumption that you are playing by yourself in your room.
In a multiplayer game.
Right. With other people who are by themselves interacting with you from a kind of distance. Yeah. With like visual representations of their avatars who aren't them. Right. And then moving around and trying to play the game, but they can't talk to you or really express themselves in any way that isn't turning from a kid into a squid really fast.
Right. Or just kid jumping over and over again.
Yeah. And I mean, I appreciate that about Splatoon. Like, I'm never really been a big multiplayer like guy, but I put like hundreds of hours into Splatoon, you know, and like I could not do that with another like online shooter. You know, like, so I like the skew to like a one-player focus, but like there's no reason that the option to play with your friends should be that hard to access. Like there's literally no reason for it.
I mean, that
I can think of.
That's true. I have two big things, and I think that while I agree they streamline it toward either one, just you playing, or two, a full 4-person squad. Being like the two ways that they think it's cool to play this game. But I think that it really hurts the idea of like getting new people into the game.
Oh yeah.
Because I know people who have purchased the game, attempted to play with me, get paired on the other team several times in a row, like aren't playing with me. Voice chat of any kind is not really useful when you're not on the same team. And just kind of like give up because they're not really having that much fun playing adjacent to a person they know.
That's an experience that Nintendo has almost never had to try and market itself on outside of like Mario Party. Like Nintendo games generally are sold by word of mouth based on individual experiences that people have with them, not like, I want to do this with you. Like, Mario comes the closest to that in a whole lot of iterations in the way that they've done, like, Super Mario 3D World and all the multiplayer elements that they tied in with
like
that.
drop in, drop out co-op stuff.
Yeah, but it's very, very far away still from, like, drop in, drop out multiplayer against people.
Right.
Like, that's I think they were banking on someone looking at like screenshots of Splatoon 2 and thinking like, holy shit, like I'm not going through a stupid server menu, I'm walking around in like a town. Like there's a cool looking place, and all the like game designy stuff that everyone sort of intuitively accepts in something like Dota, and now has these like mechanical representations that make sense in the world. You walk into a shoe store, like your brands are particularly important in the explanation for all the different abilities of the gear, and they're kind of thematically tied into how the brands market themselves. The horde mode is a job that you go do. Like they still try and be really, they try and weave everything together in a way that makes you feel like it's a place. And it would be harder and harder to do that, I think, the more that they tried to expand themselves to general multiplayer shooter values.
You bring up Salmon Run there, and that's one thing that just makes it sting more for me, is that you can play that way in Salmon Run. You can just grab like 2 or 3 friends, and then they'll just grab a random person on your team, and you play that way.
It's like the system's already there.
Yeah, it's like it's already in there.
Yeah. Oh, pretty much.
And like you can't just do that in Turf War. Like that'd be great. It's like you were saying, like you can't just like, hey, I can't just be like, hey Chad, you want to play Splatoon together? And we just like hop on Turf War and like play, have fun.
It's always like, hey, do you want to get on Splatoon 2?
And fight each other.
Yeah, and hope that we're on the same team and that Moray Towers isn't in rotation and some guy that's level 4 doesn't show up and like stay in the lobby for an irrationally long time despite the fact that he's yet to press the right trigger button.
Right.
Yeah, all of these things that just seem to happen.
Right, that's another thing that I just thought of. I was like, I wish that they would just like shuffle the lobby more. Because you do end up with that scenario where it's like you and like maybe a couple other people who are any good, and then just like the rest is just people who suck. And then you keep ending up with those same people staying in the lobby, and it's just these one-sided battles each time.
Because it isn't a friend queue, it's just someone's game that you join.
Right.
So if one of you leaves, if you both leave the lobby, somebody has to sit a game out. Presumably again, because they sat a game out when they joined you, in order to get into the game again. It's the strangest, like, Turf War, the most casual mode of Splatoon 2, is impossible to casually play with your friends. Yeah. That being said, the lack of communication, maybe not that bad of a thing, or a really bad thing, depending on how you I want to look at it, because I have, like, 100% just rule of large numbers. At this point, have told, like, a 9-year-old to go fuck themselves. But I'd said it to me, and they couldn't hear it.
Yeah.
Which is good, but if I knew they were a 9-year-old, I probably wouldn't have told them to go fuck themselves, which is bad.
Whatever. But just to make it clear, after talking about that, I don't think... Like, I'm still... support the same thing that I believe in the Splatoon 1 cast, which is I like that this is a multiplayer game where I can go into turf war and no one can type or yell anything at me. That makes my experience better. My only claim is that it's inconsistent of them to try and hold that while also being the like hyper-competitive esports game that Nintendo wants to apparently push for themselves. Like they have to recognize that that you need coordination. In order to coordinate, you need actual words spoken from people, not like things that are on the D-pad.
Right.
No matter how good their 4 different contextual actions can be.
Even though it's currently still just 2.
Yes.
I mean, when we played Overwatch together, like we could get on and just the 3 of us could talk to each other.
Yep. You
like
can do group chat or team chat.
Yeah, like that's what this needs. It needs the option to just chat with your friends if you're playing with your friends.
Right.
But you would have to have an easy way to play with your friends first.
Yes. Which they have, but it would need to be turned on in the casual quick play.
Yeah, like we should be able to like get on like a group chat in Salmon Run or something.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know.
But, well, you actually... All right.
Without having to all be in the same room or use Skype or Discord or whatever.
We'll talk about this off cast because it's like literally unentertaining garbage. But there's a thing called the online lounge that we actually could be using that would allow you to use the voice chat in game for the people that we're playing with only. So that also exists in the game, and they just didn't turn it on.
But by in the game, they mean
in Salmon Run only.
There you go. They put all the good ideas in Salmon Run.
In Salmon Run, which I think we will talk about after the break. I haven't done one of those in a while. Welcome back to the podcast. On the first half, we talked about the game a little bit, how we liked it, and then we bitched to no end about some of the online features, and kind of concluded on the discussion of a subject related to Salmon Run.
Mm-hmm.
And Salmon Run is the coolest goddamn thing in this game.
Yeah. Salmon Run is the reason that this is actually a sequel to Splatoon and not like a weird kind of deceptive glorified update to Splatoon.
Even with Salmon Run, it could still be considered like an expansion pack.
Whatever. Point being, if it didn't have it, it would be unambiguously like not deserving of being called a sequel, and it's an incredibly important, cool, in its own right game mode that could just stand on its own with different theming.
Yeah. I think Salmon Run accomplishes a couple of important things. One thing that we neglected to talk about and likely will continue to neglect to talk about for the majority of this is the single player. Though the single player does a good job of teaching people movement to some extent and also using the motion controls, which is important, and the single player is kind of like a low stakes, just like you have a controller in your hand.
Yeah, it's in there to teach you how to play the game. Yeah. It's like in Portal, like when they say you need to get thinking with portals.
Yeah,
that's what the single player does for Splatoon.
You need to get thinking with motion controls.
Yeah, thinking with ink.
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the new tagline for Splatoon 2. Thinking with ink.
Thinking.
Ooh, even better.
Thinking.
It's just one
Getting
word.
You thinking.
Yeah. But Salmon Run works a goddamn miracle in this game, as far as I'm concerned, of forcing everyone to play every weapon all the time. Because if you want to be good at Salmon Run, which you do, because it's one of the many treadmills this game has to keep you like always on the gear grind of getting perfect, great, awesome gear, so that you can complain loudly about it when you lose anyway. Everyone does that, right?
Yeah.
But it, like, you can't go in being like, I play the Splatter Shot Pro, only weapon I use, and expect to, like, just do well in Salmon Run. Like, you have to learn the other weapons in order to use them. I think that is the strongest thing that Salmon Run brings to the table, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. They got a nice sort of partial coincidence in that average team sizes in Splatoon are always 4 anyway, and 4 is like just a high enough number that when they curate which weapons to include, and they are curated, I assume.
It can't be totally random.
It can't be totally random.
Well, it has been once. Also, kind of. I'll get into this in a second.
Indeed.
Go on.
They can select combinations of weapons so that everyone will kind of have something that they can attach to. Weapons. There's never been a time I've looked at Salmon when I've been like, ugh, I hate all of those. And because there's 4, because it's so hard to get a collection of 4 weapons that have distinct identities that don't fill the same role,
right?
And you hate all of them.
Yeah. There was the one, I feel like would be remiss for not bringing up the one time that the Salmon Run weapon set was 52 gal, 96 gal, L3 nozzle nose, H3 nozzle nose, which I saw a lot of people complaining about because those are weapons that have very dedicated but not very large users.
Yes.
Like, people who like those weapons fucking love those weapons, but people who don't use them aren't usually huge fans. And I can see some people thinking that with those, but it was fucking balanced.
Yeah.
Because, like, it was just, it had good inking plus range plus whatever. Like, all the things were taken care of.
Oh, yeah. And that sort of weird pseudo-balance where you have someone that vaguely fulfills every role and they have a little bit of leeway in terms of the fun random stuff they can put in, like Clash Blaster or the Ink Brush occasionally as like a runner for eggs. You have...
Don't talk shit on the Clash Blaster. I actually genuinely like that weapon.
I know, I just think it's very unique and fulfills a different role than a lot of other things. It's like similar to the Luna. But they've used the weapon selections that they go through to kind of curate their own experiences every time you go through the same maps, because as the weapon sets change, it creates like an actual strategic difference in how you have to approach all of these levels that you're going through. Every Salmon Run for now, and I imagine for a long time, is going to feel unique because of the weapon sets that you have access to, because you have to adapt to the tools that you have and the tools that your team as a whole has. Mm-hmm. You've all got jobs in the way that a lot of other like class-based systems have jobs, and that's very different from the random groups of people that you get joined up in turf war and competitive Splatoon.
Right.
When you all intentionally have roles, it forces more communication and more teamwork in a way that's kind of harder to build in the way that matchmaking currently works in the rest of the game. And it's part of the reason why it just feels so unique and fun, and I can keep coming back to it.
Yeah. Salmon Run did for me what, playing, 6-stack Q in Overwatch does for me, where I realize that the game as a whole is better if everyone, understands what they're supposed to be doing. Which is, the big... That's going back to the first half again, which I don't think we need to do, is my biggest issue with playing online in this game, is that a lot of times people just, they're doing their thing because they don't actually even know what you're going to be doing when they queue up. Whereas with Salmon Run, it's like, you just know generally what your weapon is good at, and everyone just sort of gels like that.
Yeah, and sometimes you can
really naturally too, weirdly naturally.
Sometimes you're ignorant about the weapons that comes up. Sometimes you get a weird blaster variant that you've never touched before, and you figure out as part of going through the 10 games or so that you normally have to go through to get your special fancy ball at the end of the pachinko machine that you're given as your rewards for your job. Sometimes you have an organic learning process where you figure out what the weapon's good at, because the kind of enemies and the bosses that you face in Salmon Run are diverse enough that weapons are meaningfully better or worse against different challenges that you face.
That happens a lot when there isn't a charger in rotation. Mm-hmm. People won't immediately realize which weapon's good against what are they called?
The steelheads.
Steelheads, yeah.
Or the big jeans, I believe, as JJ once referred to them as.
All right, it was a tense situation. We were all together. I had seconds to react, and big jeans was the best that I could do.
That's the thing that really stands out to me is like the Charger's role seems very like specifically defined, and when you have somebody that doesn't understand that, you just are screwed.
And I mean, I do that shit all the time when I'm on Charger as well, because I do play Chargers occasionally, but when I do, I usually play like the Squiffer, where I'm just basically operating at like a splatter shot range, but with a Charger. And when I'm playing in Salmon Run, they hand me an E-liter. I'll be like, I'm gonna go get that egg, and then I'm like, I can't do. Oh fuck! Like, I kill myself because I'm bad. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that you just have to like accept, roll with, and like hope that they learn.
Yeah.
Yep.
I give this mode so much props for not just forcing me to use different weapons, but for forcing me in some cases to like weapons I'd never expect to ever care about.
Yep.
Like it's so fun for me to use an elater in Salmon Run on specific modes. Obviously, weapons vary in how fun they are mode to mode, but like what stands out to me is the mothership levels.
Yeah.
Using like an E-liter on one of those, it's just like a freaking riot, because you have to watch as all of these little drop ships come off of the mothership, and you have to like be smart about where you're going to be in advance, and you're just like sniping them over and over out of the sky,
right,
time after time after time. It makes yourself feel good even when you're not good with an E-liter, as almost everyone isn't.
Okay, so me as Mr. Andy Mick, ignorant to shooters.
That's what I call you every day.
Do other horde modes, like zombie modes or whatever, and other shooters have bosses in the way that like this game does?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That
seemed unique to me, but I don't know anything, so.
That was a really early iteration, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, it's still, like, while it uses the same trappings, we were discussing this earlier, trying to figure out, like, how this stands up compared to, like, other horde modes in games. And I feel like, honestly, the movement mechanics in Splatoon are enjoyable enough that, like, in Salmon Run, 90% of you moving the control stick is you, like, frantically getting away from imminent death. Like, and 10% of the time is when the countdown's happening before the match starts. So, like, that movement is so satisfying and so, like, tense and, like, good, and you can control it or you can fuck up and die. And that kind of thing is so good that it's far and away the most incredibly intense horde mode experience, even if it isn't the most difficult. Because I do find it's not impossible most of the time.
Yeah, things can turn bad in just like an instant.
Yeah, it's like, I'd say for like all of us are professionals at this point.
Professionals.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And I would say maybe 65-35 to whether we win or lose a given game of Salmon Run. Is that fair?
Yeah. Most of
the
the time
when it's the three of us.
Yeah. I guess two things based on what you said earlier, Chad. First, I think Salmon Run has a kind of bad series of early game levels and a bad tutorial. I think it's easy to... I think late game Salmon Run is amazing. Early game Salmon Run kind of because you don't have to engage with a whole lot of the mechanics to be passable at early game Salmon Run. A lot of reviews complained that it just felt like you were ignoring the movement mechanics. You just had to sit around and shoot your gun, and I can go to any game for that. But that ignores how much controlling lanes and making a balance between how many creatures you leave alive and what important targets you kill, because you can't kill all of them on the higher difficulty modes.
Yeah, it's literally impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found, the tutorial just doesn't include some of, the bosses you see later on.
Yeah.
Like, grillers don't show up in the tutorials, all the special ones, like Mothership.
Yeah, Mothership isn't in the tutorial.
The glowflies, or whatever what those are called.
Yeah.
Legally they were called glowflies.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Nailed it.
And, those aren't tutorialized, so you just, lose. the first time you run into those.
Yeah, because you just don't know what you're doing.
Like,
I like that in part, not the losing part, obviously. I think
losing sucks.
Glowflies should have had...
Losing's for losers.
it's like, I don't understand why they wouldn't tutorialize them all.
Because they wanted them to be secrets. Because they are secrets, especially for us when we first started playing, immediately after launch. And they don't exist on the lower difficulty levels.
Right.
That's the other thing about the reason why higher level Salmon runs better, is because you literally knew, like, completely different goals and ways of playing unlock. And I like, specifically the Mothership. Because the Mothership only appears in the highest levels, even though it's kind of an easy round.
Yeah, that one's easier to understand.
Right. That has a more intuitive mechanic set, and you don't lose immediately for fucking up on the Mothership, unlike the other modes.
Right.
And I thought that was a cool experience to like the thing appearing off of the horizon. It was a neat evocative moment, even if it wasn't like the ultra challenge that it sort of aesthetically presents itself as. But I agree with you that like glowflies, you just die if anyone does anything wrong ever in glowflies.
Grillers, I think, are the hardest.
They are the hardest.
Yeah,
those ones just rock you if you don't know what's going on.
Yep. Glowflies has like a... How do I describe it? It's like kind of fucking strange because, like you said, if anyone does anything wrong, you lose. And it's always the most stressful situation trying to correct for something.
Yeah.
Like running out of ink by surprise. You're like... I have to, like, just go somewhere and not die for a few seconds to regain it.
Yeah.
But if everyone knows what they're doing,
it's easy.
It is the most boring version of Salmon Run there is.
Agreed. It exists only as kind of a difference in kind, but mechanically doesn't really have anything to add about the things that make Splatoon fun and unique.
Right.
That is the thing that I was saying earlier. Early reviewers thought all of Salmon Run is, which is you sit in one location and you shoot the things that are coming at you, and you occasionally move a little bit to the left to put your eggs away.
In the case of glowflies, even particularly, you don't have to aim at shit.
Yep.
Yeah,
you just fire in a lane.
Everyone just like stands in a clump and shoots at one spot.
Yeah. Someday,
no
if you have a roller, everyone takes a nap. And you hold the R button and lightly move the stick forward.
Yep.
Like, it's the strangest decision, I think, in the whole of Salmon Run.
It's really interesting and fun before the community solves the mode.
Right.
Because especially since it wasn't tutorialized, it's like just a panic.
Mode.
It's just madness. But it punishes you so hard for errors that, in order to, I think, promote that panicked feeling, that there's never any variety in tactics. You have no room to do anything else except the perfect thing.
And there's always that panic because you don't know if your teammates know what it is.
Yep. At this point, we're starting to get, the game's been out long enough that it's been a long time since I've seen someone truly ignorant of a perspective. The last thing they really teach people these days is how to recognize in advance when it's going to be low tide and you have to go to the other egg basket, and not to randomly search for the goldies always in Goldie Hunt, where you shoot the pipes. Because if you shoot too many pipes when you're trying to pick up eggs, you'll get overwhelmed with enemies.
Yeah, that happens all the time still.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah. When I see somebody die in the gold one mode, I'm always like, we're in trouble.
Yes.
Because somebody has opened 50 of these already.
Yeah, it is kind of hard to intuit what's going on in that one.
Yeah, it's especially hard to communicate in that one because it's not a simple over here, because you're checking different things. So one dude could be over on one side, just bomb rushing every fucking thing.
As to sort of zoom out a little bit, and assuming you guys didn't have anything else you wanted to add specifically on that topic,
I'm pretty sure that we all know that grillers are bad, so we can move on.
Grillers are an interesting puzzle, but I think too narrow to belong on the cast, unfortunately. I might write up a paper on grillers.
Yeah, here's the thing with grillers that I think we can just say and move on, is that grillers are really hard for a lot of people, and the problem is even when you know what you're supposed to do, they still require you to have a really good shot.
Yeah.
And if you fuck up a little bit, which motion controls aren't super forgiving, you do sort of sometimes just team wipe for seemingly no reason sometimes.
Mm-hmm. If you get two of them on you as well, and you make one mistake, and you're probably done.
Yeah.
But the decision, the stealth, perfect game design decision that I think they made that really makes this a Splatoon version of Horde mode and not another iteration on Horde mode, which is something we've had probably like between like a decade and half a decade to iterate on at this point.
Something like that, yeah. Definitely a decade.
Is egg fetching. Egg fetching is like the stealth best mechanic of this for a ton of reasons. First, it shifts it from a defensive mode to an offensive mode. Mm-hmm. And you want in Splatoon things to be offensive because the mechanics are all about you doing stuff and going out. Like in a Call of Duty, there's tons and tons of mechanical incentives to sit down and like try and essentially,
basically tower defense.
Yeah, like snipe. Like the challenge is trying to match the reticule to the thing and hit it well,
right.
While aiming down sights and not being able to move very much and getting in a defensible position, stuff like that. But you're not looking for cover in Splatoon. You're looking to move. So having an egg out there that you have to run, get, and come back and retrieve forces you to not defense up. In fact, defending anything isn't even your goal. There's nothing that you gain other than just more turf by holding a line. And once you get the egg, the fact that you have to retrace your own steps is what is part of the things that, even on lower difficulty modes, makes painting important.
Yeah.
Because now you are forced to go through a safe route back to where you were before, and it gives you a time to reload in the natural sort of Splatoon cycle. Like it gives you an excuse where you have to go back into the ink to accomplish this goal effectively. You're not going to just jog back to the starting position, which means you naturally get ammunition back. It's a cool tension. I thought a great decision that they made for a mode like this. It makes everything so active.
It's also a very Nintendo decision. It shifts the focus off of you killing things. It makes it more about, like, completing the job of fetching the eggs, is what Salmon Run is about.
That's true. I never really considered that, but, like, Mr. Grizz doesn't show up at the end of the match and go, like, good work killing all those guys. Yeah. He says, like, you brought me this many eggs.
Right.
And like everything in Splatoon, weirdly, there's a really dark undertone to everything. And Mr. Grizz is not an exception to that. But it's
Mr.
not
Grizz might
the focus.
Be the weirdest thing in all
he's
of
just
Splatoon.
a fucking bear
He's like
radio.
a talking bear radio.
Yeah.
Who knows what's on the other end of that?
Yeah, he's a complete mystery, like, robber baron of some kind. Like, he's a weird, like, I'm going to send you off to this other society to explicitly raid them. Why?
Take their unborn children and give them to me.
Although they
unspecified reasons.
And you can tell that the Salmons are like this sort of like rushed version of a military society where like they don't have like conventional, like, because when you optimize for military weaponry, you get generally like military weaponry.
You get the things that the Inklings have.
Yeah, you get like inkzookas.
Right.
Yeah, gun-like objects.
This is a guy with like a cobbled together gun on the top of a stack of pots and pans.
Exactly. Yeah. People are attacking you in large numbers with spoons. Yeah, the heavies are just dudes with kitchen equipment. They didn't they were clearly working very fast to muster some kind of military defense. They are very
frantic in their animations too.
Oh yeah, and stupid and ignorant, which is why we can steal their stuff.
Knowing Nintendo, Mr. Grizz might just be a sentient talking radio.
Also, that is possible. The best guess, probably a bear.
Probably a bear.
Mr. Grizz is a good bear name. For sure.
Apparently the last bear, since it's a mammal.
Yeah. It's super weird, though, that he wants the eggs, because is he, like, incubating them and then hatching them into salmon that he then eats? Because bears don't eat salmon eggs, they eat salmon.
Or maybe that's just the reason that he's not a bear.
He could not be a bear. He could be just a really rich guy who wants lots of caviar.
Exactly. I think that fits the theming, is they want this guy to be like a crazy rich man.
Just like a super wealthy radio owner.
He could essentially just have like a salmon farm where he just raises salmon and eats them.
Right. This could be in the post-apocalyptic society, not actually a post-apocalypse, where humans are still totally around, but Mr. Grizz is a ham radio enthusiast who happened to get a direct line into Inkopolis.
It does open the question, though, which might be explained by they're stupid, why the salmon carry their eggs up with them? Because you can't go in the water. So they are bringing the eggs to you.
True.
And they don't seem to be invading anything else.
They're just all the female.
Oh my
salmon,
god!
And they're all pregnant with eggs.
All of the bosses are pregnant is the
Yeah.
most tragic reading of Salmon Run that could ever exist.
Yeah.
That would
They're
explain
all female.
why they have to field their strongest, large, mighty female troops too. Like, they can't afford.
I think
to not-
everyone knows that they don't have to. They could just really, like, if we're James Bonding this, where it's like, well, the villain doesn't have to explain his plan.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way, why didn't they just kill him when he walked in the door? They could just send infinite small fry, and nobody would make it out alive.
Do they have infinite small fry?
I mean, they seem to.
Yeah. I mean, basically all salmon do in their lives is reproduce. So I
This
think
is
it
true.
tracks.
Yeah.
I just think it's like, if they were just trying to send infinite small fry, they would know that they would never win. So it seems like a harder sell to the small fry, dumb as they are.
True.
Because, like, if you send them, like, with the morale boosting female generals, if you send them with mom,
Right.
then of course they are willing to, like, ride into battle with their stupid grins on their faces. But if they're just like, just go up there forever until they leave and die, like, you're literally just, you're not solving the
grinder.
problem. You're throwing bodies to delay the problem
Right.
indefinitely forever.
We'll need to sit down and write up, like, a battle plan for the salmon, so we can like figure out the optimal strategy here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Not a good life for anything that they've got going on.
Yeah.
Do we have anything actually important to say about Salmon Run or why it's good?
Oh, there is one thing. I feel like this is the last, like, actual note that I have, like, dealing with Salmon Run. And that is the fact that Salmon Run, I like that it has its own meta where, like, you sort of learn these things that are important to it. So, like, target prioritization plus, like, map control, especially in regards to walls, plus, just, like, ink management and bomb management especially are, like, a whole thing. Because, like, everyone at this point knows, like, hey, you can't let a flyfish live for that long or everyone will die, guaranteed.
Yeah.
And I think low-key, a lot of people like to ignore stingers, and that's a huge mistake.
Yep. They're always at the edges of the map.
Yeah. But, like, that kind of thing where you just sort of, like, once you get, like, the sweet science of Salmon Run down, everyone just sort of knows what to do and where to go, and it's like a beautiful, well-oiled machine.
Agreed.
Until they send 5 of the same boss.
I do love the design of the specific bosses. I like that they have just the right amount of variability where it feels like different types of weapons are so much better at dealing with them that there needs to be just, like, one guy whose job is, for example, to kill, like, the genes or whatever.
Oh yeah, the
big genes.
The big genes.
Steelheads.
Steelheads.
But it's low enough that there's still, like, lots of different types of weapons can deal with different types of problems. They're just better or worse out by a pretty wild scale. It's a great way to balance, like, differences in kind, variability in what you have to do based on the weapons and maps and goals that you have with your teammates. I like the specific ways that you have to deal with most of the bosses. Some better than others, but, like, it's fun to, like, sit up with a splatter scope and, like, just wait for that, like, giant steel eel or whatever to turn in just the right way to reveal its weak spot again so you can pop it off and kill it.
Right.
I love having to, like, dodge around the like, missiles that get fired at you while you're trying to get closer and closer to the bomb guy. And I even like trying to shoot the missile back at the umbrella people in their nice little defensive huts. Like, everything that you do feels different than just shooting repeatedly at a thing.
Right.
In one way or the other.
And I like that a lot of the bosses even have just shoot at them a lot as, like, a viable alternative strategy if shit is just too far gone.
Yep.
Like, Drizzlers have that. You don't necessarily have to break down the scrappers. Maws can be shot to death in, like, the longest fucking battle of all time.
Yep. Probably the one thing that I wish would be different is that about the mode as it exists now is I wish they'd replace one of the guaranteed specials of Bomb Rush with something else. I feel like Bomb Rush doesn't really have a home, even though it seems like it should or might.
Right.
I'm not entirely clear why, if you guys are, but why do you think
Because
Bomb Rush isn't
the
good?
enemies keep moving.
Yeah, so like the bombs are themselves are not that effective on like groups. They're
Like
good.
if you want to use the specials to deal with the bosses.
Of course,
Right.
yeah.
And like the most like if you throw a bunch of bombs around, you're probably just gonna kill a bunch of small fry. Like you're not like the bosses are just gonna like move, like continue moving, and probably not get hit by the bomb, or if they do, it won't be enough damage to kill them.
Yeah, because you're not good enough with bombs. Because most
Yeah,
people
you can't.
aren't.
Yeah, you can't like aim them quite accurately enough.
My like experience, because I've actually come around on Bomb Rush. Like I think that it's better than you give it credit for specifically. Because the temptation with Bomb Rush is to just like mash the R button and throw a million bombs.
Yeah.
But I think the actual use of it is particularly on things like, well, it is like, I would say 3 really good uses. One of which is to calmly throw 2 bombs to take out a fly fish for free, with no drain to your ink tank.
Yeah.
To kill like moths, because moths will vacuum up bombs if you throw them close to when they jump out.
Yep.
And then clearing out really huge groups of small enemies.
That are all sort of forced into the same direction.
Right.
Which is quite often
It's a
that.
particularly good thing to use if the glow fly round is going badly.
Right, or you could use it to res teammates.
You can also use it to res, because bombs are incredible at resing teammates.
Yep. Well, they're all good uses.
Obviously, it will never be as good as the best special, Stingray,
Yeah.
which destroys everything for free from a distance and is just cheap and great.
I like the splashdown.
Splashdown is the best oh shit special, for
Oh,
sure.
I love their attempts, and this is what I forgot before, to try and rebalance things afterwards. There have been updates to how things mechanically interact with each other in Salmon Run, which I like. Specifically, I like that they've tried to make the flyfish vulnerable to more things as the game's gone on.
Right.
Because I do kind of agree with the room. Well, I don't think they're like cheap or anything. I do think they're a little bit harder to interact with than you want. Like they're a little bit too far on one end because of how much ink you have to have saved up at a time to throw a bomb. I would prefer in that mode either for bombs to cost less ink or for flyfish to just have one of the big old bucket and just be more of a threat than like what they are now comparatively.
I feel like their design with the flyfish specifically is to encourage is to
Teamwork.
specifically get 2 people to attack it.
Yeah.
Like they just want you to have 2 people there to deal with them at one
You
time.
might want to have better voice chat if you're going to do that.
That's a good point. But otherwise, I agree. Like some of them feel a little bit too hard to interact with, and I feel like they wanted most of them to not be able to be solo kills.
Agreed.
But
Yeah, at
a
least not
lot of
easily.
them are easy solo kills accidentally, just from experience, basically.
It's the stinger is the reason why I don't have a problem with flyfish as a thing. If the stinger was gone, I would.
So after you play some of that Salmon Run,
Yeah.
you get some of those little those Orbeez.
Yeah.
You unlock some shit. Basically, I'm trying to get to talking about how cool the gear is in this game.
Why do you think the gear is so cool in this game?
Well, I think the gear is cool in both games because I like the concept that they went with that shockingly few other games ever go with, which is just putting actual like clothing that you could buy in a store in stores in the game, and then you buy them and wear those clothes. And they're just regular ass clothes, despite the fact that you're like a fantasy cephalopod creature. You still just wear like a fucking snapback. And
Even like the cool clothes are things that I own in Splatoon by and large.
it's just really it's just a really cool fucking thing. I mean, obviously the abilities are what people are mostly concerned with. That's just a lie, actually. Thinking about it for even 1 second, most people care way more about what their Inkling looks like than the abilities. But
Yeah. I'll take the clothes that I like a pool of clothes I like, and like try to get like one shirt, one pair of shoes, and like one like headwear thing good, and then I'm set. That's what I'm wearing.
for the whole game.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've made more strides towards making you're incentivized even more to be a fashion squid than the first game, because abilities, as a general rule, are less good than they were in Splatoon 1. They affect you a little bit less than they did before, and that amount that they affected you was already super minuscule. So what you're giving up by trying to go for fashion squidding, if you have to actually trade off anything, is very small.
Yep.
And in this game, as part of the many grind wheels, you have essentially now through chunks, the Splatnet secret shop, and ordering gear from other people in your game, and the drink tickets, a way to pretty much just over the long term get any gear with any abilities you want, and it just takes forever to find and do.
Right.
Like, there's the promise that anyone could have their favorite set of abilities and clothes as a long-term goal.
Yep.
I think it's a good balance between the short-term benefits of gear mix and matching, which is like you force people to, based on the abilities that they want, to try out different styles and like new definitions of cool. But over the long term, you get to narrow down to who you want your Inkling to be.
Yeah, which is really good because like, so one thing I do want to talk about, which you can sort of determine if this is a thing that we can lead into it from, but they introduced so many things that were like just general quality of life improvements over Splatoon 1, showing you how much of your ink tank is going to be used by a sub is really important. Something I like just forgot wasn't in Splatoon 1.
Oh no, it was there, but it was almost imperceptible.
That's lame as hell.
Yeah, it didn't. Now it's a line. It used to be a blue arrow that was like maybe the size of the Inkling's thumb that's on the tank.
Keep in mind, I have played Splatoon 1 for like, I don't know, 300 hours. Didn't even know that was there.
Me neither.
Yeah.
Almost imperceptible. I'm being literal here.
Yeah. So now I have a line and shit. But I cannot believe that it wasn't... they thought it was cool to do the reroll thing in Splatoon 1. Because the amount of... Well, for one thing, it encouraged something that I totally forgot about until we were talking about this the other day. It was that save scumming, where people would just, like, save onto an SD card and then do this, not complicated, but pretty tedious process of, like, swapping out your save data, doing the reroll. If you don't like it, swapping it back in, and doing it repeatedly over and over again until you get the shit that you like. Because this system is just, like, way better.
Yeah.
If you actually want to wear things that are good.
Yes.
Particularly since, like, I don't know, useful items sometimes looked real stupid.
Snorkel mask.
Snorkel mask. Like, I'm upset that the bomb defense line is incline, the fucking, like, climbing gear only line of clothing, which just never looks good matched with anything.
Yep.
Like, you just have to look like you're hiking, or look like you left the club to go hiking for some reason.
It seems like one of those things in Splatoon 1 where they like wanted it to feel more casual.
Right.
So they just made it random.
And they somehow didn't foresee all the tears of people who wanted
they
to
were just like, this
min-max.
won't be a big deal. Yeah. That's what it seems like to me, anyway.
Yep.
Yeah.
And now it's a treadmill, and it's a fucking long treadmill, but the benefits are so minuscule between each point that I don't feel bad about not being there yet. Like, I don't feel bad that I charge my special probably literally 1% slower than if I had optimized gear. I get to just not care and just be happy that my Inkling looks cool.
I care. And I care immensely.
I could care less.
Yeah.
You could care less.
Kind of goes without saying, super amateur decision of them in the first game to include defense up and damage up as things.
Ooh, I love them breakpoints. I love optimizing for breakpoints. That's my favorite thing to do in a video game.
But yeah, now that they've completely removed all of that out of the player's hands, and they didn't do the stupid half measure of the first game where like each individual up essentially didn't matter. All that mattered were the breakpoints.
Exactly.
So only a certain number of them you ever had to care about. And that all gets to be gone, and the weird metagame between how many defense up people wear and how many attack up people wear is also gone.
Yeah.
You just can balance the weapons against each other and not have to care about any of that.
Yeah. It was the worst thing about the attack up, defense up fucking weird issue was the way that it interacted with chargers. Because it was basically saying, like, you have to get this much of a charge to get a kill on somebody with 0 defense up. Versus you have to get this much of a charge with this much attack up against somebody with this much defense up. Because chargers weren't really giving much up to use attack up.
Yeah.
Because chargers mostly rely on their main weapons a lot. Don't, like, swim around all over the place. You could get away with just running infinite fucking damage up on them and then being able to kill people with, like, a minimal amount of charge.
Yeah.
Which is why chargers were really popular, damage up clothing was fucking everywhere, and why they had to do fucking strange balance changes in the middle of Splatoon 1's run where, like, they were like, the E-liter doesn't shoot quite as far if you have a little bit of a charge versus this much charge, and everything is just so much more simple now.
Yep.
And it's a big thumbs up.
Kind of minor thing. Do you guys find yourselves as, essentially close to the exact target market of Splatoon 2, caring about the additional portability the Switch provides?
I use it in handheld mode a lot. Like, the fact that we live together and if we're going to play together, we play in the living room. The fact that I don't have to bring my TV in there. I can just bring my Switch with me.
Right.
Is great. But, like, I think since it's an online game, like, you're not going to be, like, taking it out on the go with you because you need internet.
Right.
Right.
So it's convenient in our specific situation, but, like, overall, like, if I was not living with someone else that had a Switch, I don't think I would use it at all.
Right. Because it's not like we've come to a situation where we, like, can meet up together for Splatoon, like, co-op circumstances. Like, at best, it's I come over to your house before or after we record a podcast, and I set up my weird little tiny screen, which is clearly suboptimal, and try and do the controller with it with my face all scrunched up by and next to it. But it's certainly better than the alternative. Like, I don't think it's good, but it's better.
It's better than having to bring a television.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's definitely better than that.
I like playing it in handheld mode. I think I'm the only one here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I think it controls just as well in handheld mode, personally.
It has enough granularity in the options to make it comfortable to use in handheld mode. My problem is that I just hate the Joy-Cons. For this game, more or less specifically, because I played Zelda a lot with the Joy-Cons, and they are cool if you don't have to use their shitty R buttons. Like, the shoulder buttons on the Joy-Con are not particularly responsive or good, and so I like using the actual controller. I have taken Splatoon on the go, in as much as I've taken it just to work. And, like, I never did anything in Splatoon other than play the single player when I was at work, which is why I have all the hero weapons now, but also is now just a brick. Like, I can't play Splatoon anywhere without an internet connection.
Yep.
And do anything that's actually, useful.
Yeah. Makes sense. I guess all that's left to clear up then is which of our now 4-man strong selection of waifus is the best one.
It's still Callie.
Yeah, still Callie.
JJ, who do you like?
I think Maria.
Callie. You heard it here. He likes Callie.
That's definitely
Right.
JJ's voice.
Yep. Done. Good work.
All right.
Thank you for listening to 50 fucking episodes of NOCLIP. It's actually been, like, more than that, but you know how we do.
What are we talking about next time?
Next time, we're strapping on our spooky pants and playing... I'm just going to do that again. Next time...
What's wrong with spooky pants, Chad?
I don't know, but I didn't like it. I felt bad after saying it.
Good.
Next time, we're going to be talking about Fatal Frame Maiden of Black Water, which was a weird Wii U exclusive Fatal Frame game.
Digital only for some reason.
Yeah, it's quite the anomaly of Wii U releases. And until that time, you can get a hold of us at NOCLIPpodcast.com, NOCLIPpodcast.net, NOCLIP Podcast on YouTube. Also other places that are listed on those first websites that are the same website.
Bow, 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 bow.
So, we came here to fight. Let's try again.
We came here to fuck.